welcome back. If you're here, I'm really glad I didn't scare you off last time, as Paul gave us a pretty shocking opening statement. He said that God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and all unrighteousness of men, that they suppress the truth. And Paul is talking about a big problem that the heathens have. And the problem is they suppress the truth of God, what they learned about God through creation. They suppress it, they ignore it, and they stubbornly hold it down, and they pretend it's not there. And instead of worshiping the one who made them, instead they worship anything else, birds, animals. And we talked a little bit how that's even something that we do today in different ways. So Paul says that these pagans do that, and that God's wrath is revealed on them for doing that. Now, what is that? What is this wrath Paul's talking about? And maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is that God's going to zap them, rain fire and brimstone on these guys, or strike them with a plague. That's kind of what I think about when I think about the wrath of God. But Paul is about to give us a different perspective of what the wrath of God actually looks like, and it may surprise you. Let's jump in at verse 24. Therefore, anytime you see therefore, always go back and see what the therefore is there for. Because of what these heathens did, therefore, God gave them up to uncleanness. This is the wrath. This is the punishment. In the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves. The wrath of God here is really simple. God gives them up to the thing they're worshiping. He says, go ahead. If you want to worship the animals, I won't try to stop you. Go ahead and do it. It's God taking his hands off. And what's really interesting is that as they worship animals, they're actually starting to become more like what they worship. People with no conscience, driven only by their urges, by their instincts. We become like what we worship. Verse 25, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Notice they exchanged the truth. They exchanged it. That means that they had it. For this reason, because they exchanged the truth, God gave them up to vile passions. We're talking about the wrath of God here, which is God saying, go ahead. For even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due. Now, I don't think I've got to go into detail here about what Paul's talking about. It's pretty self-explanatory. But notice here that Paul says the punishment is God is giving people over to these things, saying, you want to worship nature? You want to worship yourselves? Go ahead. I will allow your society, I will allow you just to self-destruct. You're losing yourself. You're losing your humanity. And you're becoming nothing more than your passions. And God's saying, go ahead. This is the judgment. This is Paul's definition here of the wrath of God. A little different than you might have thought about it. Well, picking back up in verse 28, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind. In other words, go ahead to do those things which are not fitting. And now Paul's going to give a very detailed list of what it looks like to be given over to these things. Verse 29, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness, They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, and violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. Notice it's not that these heathens just do these things. It says they are filled with it. They're not sorry. There's no sorrow about it. There's no restraint about it. They're just filled up with it. They're given over to it. Verse 32, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. These heathens not only do wickedness, they take pleasure in watching other people do it. They want it. They want to see it. They want to watch it. It gives them a buzz. Does that happen today? Absolutely. All you have to do is turn on TV. But anyway, this is a picture of the heathen world. And in many ways, it's a picture of our own world. But Paul has made it abundantly clear that humanity is not okay. This really goes against the cultural narrative today, where people like to think, hey, I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's just doing their own thing, everything's fine. Paul's saying, you're not fine. You're holding down the truth. You are not okay. We've got a big problem here. And the next couple of sessions, we'll be talking about the solution to this problem. And it's stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. It really just boggles the mind. Not only does God solve the sin problem, but He crushes it into little pieces and makes it just into nothing. And we'll be talking about it real soon. See you next time.